in the UK. It is my pleasure to be co-facilitating this webinar with Hannah Weisfeld, the director of Yachad, who I'll be handing over to later. For those who just joined us, just be aware this is a webinar, which means that you won't be able to see the audience. The only videos that come on are those of the panelists, so don't be surprised that your video hasn't turned on, and also you are muted. So if your child runs in or your dog barks or whatever it is, please don't worry about it. For those not familiar with Yachad, our partners tonight, Yachad works to mobilize British Jews in support of a political resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. They do this through education, debate, and advocacy. Yachad are currently asking people to email the MPs as part of a campaign. You can find more details out about this campaign on their Facebook feed, their Facebook page, and their Twitter feeds. And now 2 sentences on the New Israel Fund. We are the leading organization advancing democracy and equality in Israel. We work to support civil society in Israel through raising funds for the work of the New Israel Fund and our partners in Israel, and by educating about this work here in the UK. And for us, tonight is a great opportunity for you to hear from some deep experts and leaders in Israel who are our partners and colleagues who both Yachad and NIF work with very closely. So that's a fantastic opportunity. And I'd like to thank Sharon, Shaul, Assaf, and Maisam for joining us, which is of course getting late into the evening, but for them. We have conceived of this seminar as an opportunity to share their expertise on the threat of looming annexation. I described to someone earlier today that we have the dream team of speakers, and we're incredibly grateful for them giving up their time, and thank you again, especially as we were just discussing with them. We know how demand each of them is to be speaking to Israeli audiences, to be speaking in the media in Israel, as well as to global audiences. The format of the evening is that we've asked each speaker to speak for approximately 15 minutes. You will appreciate that their expertise means that it will be a very intense 15 minutes, but we felt it was important that although each of them could easily fill a 1.5 hour webinar themselves, that to keep the content manageable, we've asked them all to make these brief presentations. After each of the speakers, we'll have time for some Q&A. You will notice at the bottom of your screen that there's a Q&A box. Please write any questions you have as you go along into that box. Maya from Yachad is monitoring that box and will be collecting those answers and feeding them into the Q&A. So please feel free to add messages there. Thank you also to those who emailed their questions in advance, which we have also gathered. I will introduce each speaker as they speak rather than doing all 4 introductions at the beginning, so we can really get into this. Our first speaker, and we're really, really delighted he's found the time to join us, is Shaul Arieli. He is, frankly, the encyclopedia of the Israeli-Palestinian political process and one of Israel's leading experts on the conflict. He served as a commander of brigade in the Gaza Strip, and as part of his military service, he was responsible for the preparation of the official negotiations with the Palestinians and as head of the interim agreement administration under the Rabin government. He also was the head of the peace administration in the Barak government. He has deep expertise and passion for these issues, and I'm going to now hand over to Shaul. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's start with my presentation here. Okay. I'm going to start my presentation, short presentations from 1988. Even it's very important to know and to understand the narrative of both parties, because the narrative is the one that defined their policies and their attitude towards the Trump initiative, the annexation idea, and the peace process. So here we can see that the PLO, after the recognition of 181 and 242 that took place in November and December 1988, the PLO came to Oslo to get its rights to 22% of the historic Palestine, according to its interpretation of 242 United Nations Security Council resolution. And Israel came up with a different approach. Israel interpreted 242 as a withdrawal from territories and not from all the territories, despite precedents in the peace treaties with Egypt and Jordan. So the main tension that we had been facing between the PLO and the Israeli government is between the official position of the PLO, about 22% of the historic mandatory, historic Palestine, and Israel has three main interests beyond the green line: about security, because of the instability of the situation around Israel, the holy places, especially in Jerusalem. I'm talking about the Wailing Wall, the Temple Mount, and of course the Jewish settlements in the West Bank. And I'm talking about more than 600,000 people who are living in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. So Israel demand to these three interests to be fulfilled by annexing part of the West Bank without providing the same territorial compensation for the Palestinian. Means the Israeli government in the beginning of this process rejected the parameter of 67 border as a basis and the land swap on 1-to-1. You can see here at this map what was the Israeli proposal in Camp David summit that took place in 2000, and it was about annexation of 11% of the West Bank. You see the Israeli blocks, the blue areas, and also leasing for 10 years of the green area. It means that we ask to keep almost 20% of the West Bank under the Israeli control or sovereignty, and again, without any compensation to the Palestinian state. It was the same in Taba 2001. On the left side, you can see the Israeli proposal about annexation of 6 until 8% of the West Bank, again, without compensation. And on the other side, you see the Palestinian proposal in Taba 2001, let Israel to annex 3% of the West Bank with the land swap according to Clinton parameter that came out in December 2000. And even after we faced the second intifada, the suicide bombers and the terror attacks, you see this idea of a unilateral step of the building the separation or the security barrier. The idea was to annex de facto, not de jure, something between 17 to 8% of the West Bank. So only in 2008, Israel, headed by Ehud Olmert, the Israeli prime minister, accepted the Palestinian position, and together with Mahmoud Abbas in Annapolis summit that took place in the end of 2007, they agreed on the 4 main parameters how to solve this conflict, or how to solve the 4 main issues of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Borders, as I mentioned, 67 borders as a basis, and a land swap on 1-to-1 ratio, security, demilitarization of the Palestinian state, and many other security arrangements, Jerusalem, division of East Jerusalem into 2 capitals, and refugees, a solution to the refugee problem without returning to the state of Israel, mostly to the Palestinian state. Here you can see exactly what were the Israeli and the Palestinian position in Annapolis. On the left side, you see the Palestinian proposal. 63% of the Israelis who are living beyond the 67 line will be under the Israeli sovereignty. it's about 2% for land swap. The Israeli proposal on the right side was about 6.5% for land swap, with 85% of the Israelis who are living beyond the 67 line. I just want to emphasize that they agreed on the parameter, and this is the point. Israel accepted the idea or said yes for 22% of the mandatory Palestine for the establishing the Palestinian state. Also about Jerusalem, you can see what was the Israeli proposal on the left side, according to the demographic line, to annex all the Jewish neighborhoods in East Jerusalem. Today, there are almost 220,000 Israelis who are living in those 12 Jewish neighborhoods, and also one small Palestinian village, this one, Bet Safafa. All the 27 Palestinian villages and neighborhoods will be under the Palestinian sovereignty. On the right side, you can see the Mahmoud Abbas proposal for Jerusalem. It was almost the same. Mahmoud Abbas asked to annex or to keep the 28 Palestinian villages and neighborhoods, but also Har Homa, the Jewish neighborhoods that was built in 1996, 3 years after the parties signed on the DOP, the Oslo Agreement. And this unilateral step that was taken by Israel contradicts the vision and the spirit of the preamble of Oslo Agreement. About Jerusalem, the holy sites, here we can see two different approaches. The Palestinian offered to divide it according to the demographic line, means that Israel can keep the Jewish quarter together with the Wailing Wall, Hakotel HaMa'aravi in Hebrew, half of the Armenian quarter, and the rest of Mount Zion. All the rest of the area will be under the Palestinian sovereignty with the Palestinian population. Here, Ehud Olmert came with different idea. To nominate international committee with 5 members, Israel, Palestine, United States, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia, to run this area without changing the status quo of the holy sites. For security, we had really a set of security arrangements. I'm not going to describe all of them, just to emphasize the point that the Palestinian state will be demilitarized state without army, without heavy weapons, and many other security arrangements. And also there was a solution for the Palestinians, basically to return to Palestine and about compensation. So, and now, what is very unique in Trump plan that came out in January 2020, like many other things, here too, Netanyahu and Trump are using the usual concept in the peace process, but applying them in completely contradictory way. Means we can hear about two-state, about Palestinian contiguity, about Palestinian capital in Jerusalem, but basically, when we look and we drill down with the details, we are facing totally different picture like this about land swap between Israel and Palestine. Israel can annex not less than 30% of the West Bank, all the blue areas, and giving back to Palestine only 14%. Means this totally contradicts the idea of a land swap on 1-to-1 ratio to keep the Palestinian demand for 22% of the mandatory Palestine. Here, about contiguity, you can see that the Palestinian state, I don't want to call it state, it's the Palestinian entity, it's more autonomy than a state. Okay, we have here 5 isolated areas connecting by roads. Some of them are not exist yet. They have to build it with more than $20 billion. means that we are not dealing with real contiguity for the Palestinian state. It also harmed the Israeli security because, as you can see here, instead of 400 kilometers for the Israeli-Palestinian border, this plan creates a new border of 1,800 kilometers. It's 3 times bigger than the all Israeli borders with Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. It means that we have to invest the Israeli army to protect these very, very long borders. Also about fabric of life, according to Trump vision for peace, in the Israeli area that will be annexed to Israel, I mean, we can see 43 Palestinian villages that will be enclaves with more than 100,000 people, and you can add to him, according to this paper, also 150 Arab Israelis that are candidates to be transferred to Palestine. You can see the green dots here, like Kalanswa, like Tira, like Jaljulia. Again, all of this according to Trump vision. In the Palestinian area, we have 17 Israeli settlements with less than 17,000 people. Israel will be responsible not only for those Israeli settlements, those Israeli enclaves, but also about the access roads to those settlements from the Israeli side. I'm talking about 135 kilometers, means this is really damaging totally the contiguity of the Palestinian state. And what about Jerusalem? This is really the big job of this vision. Israel will keep the entire United Jerusalem under its sovereignty. I'm talking about 93% of the current size of United Jerusalem, and only this area, the yellow area, will be El-Quds, 7%, which included also 2 refugee camps, Kalandia and Shoafat, as the Palestinian capital. And from Trump vision, yes, and we know that Trump vision basically is the platform to adopt and to promote the idea of unilateral annexation by Israel. And here, as you can see, what is the goal of the annexation? This shows us the swift progression of unilateral annexation from the right-wing minority to the high priority action item of Netanyahu's agenda for the coalition government he has just formed. In other words, the Israeli government's position since 1967 that the West Bank is disputed area which permanent status will be defined in negotiation and an agreement has been replaced by the policy that the Prime Minister has called gradual annexation. There are so many bills and plans what to annex to Israel. Maybe the minimum annexation we can see here about the envelope of Jerusalem. This is also something that was mentioned by Benny Gantz, the Minister of Defense, a few days ago. The envelope of Jerusalem, Etzion block, Ma'ale Adumim area, and Givat Ze'ev, it's only about 3%, but I don't see Netanyahu content with the annexation of such a small area. There are 2 more possible plans. On the left side, this is about annexation of the Jordan Valley, which is something between 20 to 23% of the West Bank, or to annex even the Jordan Valley together with the envelope of Jerusalem. This is almost 25, 26%. This is almost the limit for annexation, because as you can see at this slide, Trump plan put the limit for annexation on this number, 30%, not more than 30%. So all the ideas about annexation of the entire Area C, as the Jewish Home Party came out in 2012, meanwhile, it's a dream for the people who support the idea of annexation. So this is the maximum for the annexation. And here I would like to show you what are the implications on the daily life, because on the daily life of the Palestinians, of course, because in the first stage, I'm not saying that Israel is going to implement its sovereignty, but to absorb and to contain the responses from all the Arab world or the EU or the Palestinians. Only in the next stage, when the situation calms down, we will see how Israel is trying to implement its sovereignty. For instance, in this scenario of annexation of the Jordan Valley, in the Jordan Valley, 23% of the Jordan Valley is a Palestinian-owned land, and Israel here has two options how to take this land from the Palestinians, like confiscation, to take it as we did in East Jerusalem, and also the fact that the 12 Palestinian villages with the status area B today, according to Oslo agreement, will be enclaves. You see the green dots. It means that to keep them in those enclaves, Israel has to build a fence around them and to build gates for them and to escort them with the designated roads to reach to the border or to reach to the rest of the Palestinian entity. Also, just, you know, for the Israeli disadvantage of this idea, we are talking about additional border to Israel, almost 500 kilometers, because this is the new border between Jordan Valley and the rest of the West Bank, the borders around Jericho enclaves, and also the borders around so many Palestinian villages. And just to remind you that in this area, we have only 27 small Israeli settlements with less than 14,000 people. Here, in this slide, I would like to show you what, according to the study that we did last year, what is the domino effect of annexation. It means that in the beginning of this process, what will be the ignition point is, of course, annexation of part of the West Bank, and we will face, I don't know when exactly, a wave of West Bank violence, which means this will lead us to the turning point when the Palestinian Authority will collapse. And when I'm saying the Palestinian Authority will collapse, I mean the loss of the central function for which it was established in Oslo Agreement. It is to be the link between the Israeli and the Palestinian population until the final settlements. And I'm talking about the security coordination and cooperation, and about the custom envelope, and about workers in Israel, and many, many other things. So it will be, the collapse will be the turning point, because Israel will take the responsibility of Area A and B by establishing or re-establishing the civil administration and the military administration in Area A and B. And then, again, we don't know how it will take, how long it will take, but we can assume that because of pressure from the international community and from the Palestinian, in the end of this stage, and this will be the point of no return, Israel will annex the Area A and B and give at least the residency to the Israeli residency to the Palestinians in this area, and to take totally the responsibility for 3 million Palestinians who are living today in the West Bank. And of course, the last stage will be giving them the full citizenship, which means for the Zionist vision, it will be the end. During the
show, I'm going to have to ask you to finish off here. I'm just very aware of the
okay,
time.
I'm finishing. Good. Okay. During this process, we will face a lot of implication in the security arena, diplomatic, legal, social, and economic. Of course, I don't have time to describe all of this, but basically we are harming, I mean, Israel is harming by this unilateral step its security, because we are harming the peace treaty with Jordan and with Egypt, that giving the stability to this area, and of course the economic implication. But the most important things, it will be about the Israeli identity, because by annexation of the West Bank and giving the residency or the citizenship, in the end of this process, it means that we have two options to give up on the democratic state for the entire greater Israel, entire mandatory Palestine. And this is a dramatic change in the Israeli or Zionist movement priorities, how to build and to run this state. It was always to have democratic state with the Jewish majority, and today is changing even to have the apartheid state, not democratic state. Thank you.
So thank you, and sorry to rush you. I'm sure those with us will agree with me. We could hear the depth of this for much longer, but I also am looking forward to hearing from our other speakers. So I'm now going to hand over to Advocate Attorney Sharon Abraham-Weiss, who is the Executive Director of the Association for Civil Rights in Israel, Israel's leading civil rights organization. Sharon has built a formidable career in law, including as an Equal Employment Opportunity Commissioner, and as an equally impressive track record as a social activist. In fact, in May 2014, she was featured in Haaretz as one of the 66 most prominent women in Israel. It's a very impressive way to introduce Sharon.
Thank you very much, Adam. Hi, everybody. Good evening from Tel Aviv. A couple of things. First, I want to thank NIF UK and Yachad for bringing all of us together to speak about this so important matter. Everybody's speaking about annexation. I feel that it's all over the headlines, but it's really important, and I appreciate those. I see over 200 people in this conversation sitting and trying to understand deeper what does it mean, because it has a lot of implications. So the second thing, thank you for not giving up on us in Israel-Palestine conflict. A lot of people around the world are sitting at home and have a lot of other concerns. I want to thank the strong letter against annexation that was signed by prominent people, including Clive Sheldon, the chair of NIF UK. I think it's really important. Now, as for the content, I want to give some infrastructure of the legal situation in Israel and Palestine and the occupation, and what are the legal implications of annexation. So let's start with the known occupation, okay, which is should be abnormal as well. It's not something normal. It seems that the international law, when they thought about putting it together and thinking about occupation, it was supposed to be a short-term situation. So the whole legal framework is for transition, something that had to be moving very fast on, and it's like to freeze the situation and not change it and make worse the situation of the refugees. Unfortunately, as we know, at least in our conflict, it takes a few decades already, and some of the international and humanitarian law about occupation is not relevant, or it's hard to sustain it. So when we speak about occupation, it means two things. One, it means temporary military regime. So the whole idea is that you don't have a Knesset or a parliament or direct legislation. It should be a temporary military regime that will handle the situation until things will be clear. This is A. And the second component is the protected local population. So the local population must be protected, and all the international and humanitarian law is looking towards this situation, that their situation is not going to be worse. So we have the military regime and the protected local population, and it's illegal to apply a direct law. So it's illegal to apply a direct Israeli law. So when the Knesset, the parliament, is legislating, it's not going to be over the occupied territories, not directly. It is being brought to the occupied territory during those years of occupation by the military regime. So the military commander on the ground issue orders that brings the law into the occupied territories. The default of the law, according to international law, is the law that was relevant in the night of the occupation. In our case, the Jordanian law in 1967, which is really, I mean, it's not relevant in Jordan. So it's a big legal mess over there. And as I said, the default, no direct law. There was, I'm glad to say was, in the past 2 days, I can say was. There was a law that was the first time that the government of Israel, the legislator, tried to apply a direct law. It is known as expropriation law, and it allowed to confiscate private land from Palestinians and give it to the settlements. I'm very glad and I'm happy. It's a huge triumph. ACRI with other organizations had this week, 2 days ago, we got the verdict after 3 years, and the Supreme Court struck down this law. So there was a direct law, but it's no longer there. So what is actually happening on the ground? According to international law, there is occupation. Israel does not recognize occupation and the Geneva Convention directly. So there's a drift with the years. I won't get into the legal details, but basically there was some extent of recognition, but slowly, Israel changed its recognition, and the main symptom is the settlements. Settlements are a war crime according to international law. It's illegal to bring your own population, to displace, move your own population to the occupied territories, because the situation was supposed to be as the night of the occupation, as June 1967, because the whole idea of occupation was that this is going to be, in short time, it's going to be organized and will solve the problem, so you're not allowed to bring in your own people. But as we know, and as Shaul gave the presentation, I mean, there are a lot of settlements over there, and Israel is actually violating the international law while building those settlements. So according to international law, these settlements are illegal. According to Israeli policy, the settlements, most of them are legal. And the verdict was given 2 days ago. And it might be a sign to annexation as well. I'm not sure. What does it mean? It says, you know, if there was a private Palestinian land, and this law said, okay, we can take all the private Palestinian land and say that it's going to be in the settlements now, and the Supreme Court strike it down, say no. There's a violation in the right to property of private Palestinians and in the right to equality of Palestinians as well, and the right to dignity. And it was a wide bench. 9 judges were sitting there. 8 of them, it was were majority. 1 judge was the minority, saying that the law was inappropriate, but it could be amended and could hold on. What does it mean about annexation? What does annexation mean? So basically, I mean, we saw in Shaul's presentation that the language is the two-state, but what we are actually seeing there is the one state in the end of the day. What is a one state? There are many versions. I mean, what we all have to remember that when people are saying one state, in their mind, in their vision, it's not the same one state. The extreme right, Israeli supports the one state. There's some Palestinians that support the one state. There are leftists that support the one state. Don't think about the same one state. Everybody's thinking about different ways. The liberal way would say one person, one vote. It might be the vision of what is supposed to be here. A lot of people are saying, you know, the two-state is the best solution, but it's irrelevant anymore in 2020, and hence we're moving towards one state. If it's going to be a one state, it's going to be a democratic state. It's not going to be Jewish anymore in terms of numbers. On the other hand, people that are saying one state, but there's no one person, one vote, only the Jews can vote. This is two systems of law. If we speak about the two systems of law, what we actually have today to some extent in the occupied territories, it means that it's going to be a form of apartheid in the end of the day. And it might be a Jewish state, but it's not going to be a democratic state. In terms of ACRI, the way we're seeing as a human rights organization, we are not in favor of any of their solutions. I mean, the question, if it's going to be one state, two state, what is the kind of solution is a political question. What we're looking at is a partisan political, I mean, what we're looking at is in terms of human rights. And what we are seeing now, the annexation as suggested, and I have to say, I'm not sure 100% what is suggested because there is a lot of glare around it. I mean, what the details were not completely announced. What does it mean? But in our state, I mean, Palestinian citizens as refugees, and according to international law, their rights are being violated. No freedom of transportation, no freedom of dignity, no freedom of movement. A lot of freedoms are being deprived. And according to international law, the law should be applied on a territorial way, not on a personal way. And if you start applying it according to your class or group or ethnicity, okay, this is not democracy anymore. These are things that we've seen in South Africa many years ago. And this is definitely, from our perspective, from human rights perspective, a violation of human rights, and this is something that should not be supported. So I think I'll stop here, Adam, because whatever, and I'll be happy to answer questions afterwards.
Fantastic, Sharon. Thank you very much. And now moving swiftly along to our the third perspective from our third speaker, Maisam Jaljuli. Maisam is a prominent educator and social activist in Israel. And I could read out all the organizations she serves on the board of, but we'd be here all evening. But just to say it's as broad as serving on the board of the Histadrut Labour Federation to being a member of the national leadership of the Jewish Arab grassroots movement of Israel standing together. And we're really, really delighted to have Maisam here sharing her perspective.
Thank you very much for having me, and I really would like to thank all of you that you are here with us to hear about what's happening in the Palestine-Israel issues. It's really, I think that we are nowadays, we're having a very hard time, and we're facing a hard time not because of the coronavirus crisis, but because of the government plan to annex the territories. And, you know, according to the plans, 3 weeks from now, the annexation will happen. and the danger is really, we can see it, but I will talk about why people can see it in Israel, why people can see that the annexation is a real danger for all of us. But before that, I will start with two headlines that we've all read today and listened to the news. The one of the headlines was talking about, that the government and the military is applying a census in the occupied territories, and especially in the areas that should be annexed. That means that the military now and the government will count every Palestinian who lives in these territories and will prevent from other Palestinians to move and to live in these areas. That means that, and also when they count the people, if they see that anyone who lives there right now, but actually he is from another place, and so they will transfer him to the city that he is belong to. And the other one was, about the international court law in Hague. And that the Trump administration is threatening the court of sanctions if they dare dealing with Israel a violation on international law and criminal action that it does in the West Bank and the occupied territories. So these two things, I think, only an example of what we will have in the real near future of annexation. From the one side, they are trying to not letting the Palestinian move from place to another because they want, maximum land with minimum people. And from the other side, they are trying to threaten the international community not to dare and to deal with these issues. And regarding to annexation, I think that the issue of annexation was all the time in Israel since the occupation of 1967. And I will say something which is not maybe popular right here, but I think that the Labour Party and the Labour movement all the time was the people motivated the issue of annexation of the Jordan Valley. And we are talking now about the annexation of the Jordan Valley. That means that the eastern borders of Israel will be the borders with Jordan. And that means that we will have, Israel will have the whole territory by law from the Mediterranean till the Jordan Valley. That means the historic and the utopian Eretz Israel in terms of also Labour Party and if we see the Jordan Valley, I think that there is a lot of kibbutzim in the Jordan Valley, establishments and settlements which are part of the labor movement in Israel. And it's not surprising that Amir Peretz and the other members of the Labour Party said that we are all the time with the annexation of the Jordan Valley. But we know that the annexation of Jordan Valley means that this is the first step for a whole annexation of the occupied territories. So this is a historical fact, I think, that we need to say it and to say it clearly. But why did Israel didn't do annexation for the Jordan Valley and for other territories right now? I think because of the international pressure, because they didn't dare to do it because the world said to Israel, stop it. Nowadays, because of the changes of the geopolitical issues in all the world, and we see that the world is getting more and more for the right wing, and Trump and Netanyahu has a full support of the Trump administration and other also administrations in Europe. So the Europeans can do nothing. Trump is with the annexation, and the problem is the Arab world and the Middle Eastern countries. I think that the failure of the Arab Spring, the real failure of the Arab Spring, was very crucial in this issue, an issue of continuing the occupation and annexation. The reactionary regimes in the Arab world will not prevent annexation, and I think, and I'm sure also that some of them are supporting the annexation and supporting, the vanishing of the Palestinian issue by, quietly. They don't dare to say it widely, but that means when Israel felt that the international sphere is quite enough, and there will be no sanction, and there will be no, sanctions on Israel, so they feel they can move ahead, and so they are moving ahead in this issue. For all of us, it's well known, that annexation means the end of the Statut state solution, and when we say that the border will be the Jordan River, that means that there will not be a Palestinian state. And we saw the maps that Shaul showed us a few minutes ago. And we saw there is no whole territory for Palestinian state. It's, some kind of big jails, big 50, how much it will be? 17 or 18 or 19 big jails, and with walls from all over the place, that the Palestinian also cannot move from place to another. If someone lives in Ramallah and wants to move to Jericho, he needs to have the permission of the military in order to move. That means that Israel will control the whole area, and the dream of Palestinian state is vanishing. Which this is for me, a catastrophe. I'm a believer in the two-state solution. I all the time believed in it, and I'm still believing in the two-state solution. But I know that annexation will vanish this dream, and the most important thing, annexation will lead us to a real apartheid state, because annexation means sovereignty. And when we say sovereignty, that means that the people who live in these areas must, if the rational thinking said that they must be citizens of Israel, but they will never be citizens in Israel, and they will always be a second-degree class. I don't know how to call it, but they will never be citizens, and it leads us to apartheid. And the most, dangerous thing for me is also that there is a threat that Israel will do land swaps, which contains the triangle and Tira. I live in Tira. I live in the triangle, and according to Trump plan, the triangle will be a part of the Palestinian. I don't know what to call it. It's not a state, and that means that I will lose about 30,000 people, Israeli citizens, Palestinian Israeli citizens, will lose their citizenship, their Israeli citizenship, and they will be, a people of nowhere, no country, because as we see in this plan, there is no chance that a Palestinian country will be established. But in the other way, we are threatened to lose our Israeli citizenships, and we will be people without citizenship, and we will be a part of this apartheid regime. It's not only the Palestinians, so the threat is not only upon the Palestinian in the West Bank, but the threat is also on Palestinian Israeli citizens in Israel, because we know what this government wants. It's a maximum territories, a maximum land with minimum Palestinian. And with this plan, I think that the country, the people who wrote this plan, they don't even, recognize the differences between citizens and not citizens. If we are talking about the Palestinian, for them, we are the same people, the same ethnicity, And the separation will be, on ethnicity. So this will be a separation without equality and without a citizenship, and probably we will have a very dangerous apartheid regime. And what's happening in Israel right now? The whole issue of annexation, unfortunately, is not interesting the Israeli public. And this is, I think, service shows us that really there's a few numbers who are interested with the issue of annexation. People don't understand the threats of annexation. And I think that the government also, and Netanyahu had a golden time right now, because a lot of people are really occupied by the daily life issue. They are occupied by losing their jobs because of the corona crisis, occupied by losing the ability to live a decent life. And this is the issues that matter for most Israelis, also Palestinian Israelis and Jewish Israelis. So we see that there is no such a willingness to know what's happening and what are the implications of annexation. And yes, we had a very big and impressive demonstration last Saturday, which held by Hadash and Meretz and another several organizations. But it seems to be that this demonstration was, for what we call the radical left, but not the mainstream left. It seems to be that the issues of annexation are not occupating the Zionist mainstream left. So if you ask me, I think that we should increase our pressure. We should increase our demand to stop annexation. We should be in the streets more and more to convince more and more people that we are heading to a catastrophe. And I think it should be done with Jewish-Arab partnership, as it was in Saturday. But in the same time, we need to connect annexation and occupation with the economical situation in Israel. We should let the people know that all these issues are connected to each other. And another thing I wanted to say, that the international pressure is very important. We need if not,
Maisam,
I think we lost the governments in the war, but we need the people in the war. We need the people to have pressure on their governments in order to help us to save ourselves from ourselves. So, I think that the more we speak about this issue, the more that people see that we are going to a very, very bad situation.
Thanks, Maisam. Thank you so much, Maisam. That was fascinating, and sorry to cut you off, but I want to make sure that we all have time and energy to hear our last speaker, Dr. Assaf David, who is the co-founder of the Forum for Regional Thinking and a faculty member of the Department of Political Science at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Over to you, Assaf.
Thank you very much. Just a small correction, I'm not a faculty member.
Sorry.
Never mind. I guess I want to push the envelope a little bit. And it's really a topic for a very long discussion and probably even a seminar, but and we only have a couple of minutes, but I really want to touch on the some of the basic fundamentals of the two-state solution versus the one-state reality that we're living in Israel and Palestine for many years. I think we have, for the last several weeks, we've been preoccupied with this potential annexation of parts of the West Bank, the formal annexation of the West Bank, and we neglect the fact that we already have an annexation of the West Bank, of many parts of the West Bank. We have a creeping annexation of Palestinian lands for many years, and we have one state reality for many years. And I think that if you look at the deal of the century, the logic that guides the deal of the century of Trump is basically the logic that guides the right wing in Israel for at least 2 decades, which is give up on basic national rights for Palestinians in return for basic human rights. Now, we have, I hear some noise. You mute everyone? Thank you. This deal is basically proposed to the 3 different Palestinian communities that live under direct Israeli control. That is the Israelis, the East Jerusalemites, and West Bankers. This means that the right wing in Israel, and with the tacit support of, regretfully, the Zionist left in Israel, is not willing to recognize Palestinian nationhood and Palestinian rights for state, for a real state, for a sovereign state, at least since the Second Camp David summit in 2000. Now, I think that we have to face reality that the right wing in Israel has won the battle. It doesn't mean that the left wing has lost the war yet, but the right wing has lost the battle. And the battle is to suppress Palestinian national aspirations. And if you look, I mean, Maisam talked about a little bit about this, that if you look at the international arena, you look at the Trump administration, you look at the liberal democratic West, the different states in the West, you see that no one will fight for a Palestinian state. The Trump administration is pushing for the annexation. The extremist right-wing evangelist lobby in the Trump administration is pushing and is behind these this plan for annexation of parts of the West Bank, if not all of the West Bank. Germany, Britain, all the Western states will not be able to stop the creeping, again, the creeping annexation that we witnessed for several years now. They might only be able to stop the formal annexation, or the potential annexation that is supposed to be or not supposed to be in July. If you look at the Arab states, you look at the states of the Middle East, no one is willing to fight for the Palestinians. The Jordanians already announced that they will not abolish the peace treaty with Israel. The Egyptians are less in support of the Palestinians even than Jordan. Look around. No one is really can really interfere with the right wing's plans. Again, either to annex formally the West Bank, or to continue with the ongoing creeping, as I said, annexation of the West Bank that's been going on for several years now. The fact is that Israel has fought the war on terror for decades, but it also fought the political and civic leadership of the Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza. It succeeded in its quest to suppress Palestinian national aspirations. There is no state solution. I don't see any chance for a real 2-state solution in the foreseeable future. There's no Palestinian statehood. The Palestinian Authority has become basically a municipal authority that's been taking care of infrastructure and other civic issues of the Palestinian population. There's a total dismay, total frustration on the part of the Palestinians in the West Bank. And we see more and more Palestinians willing to give up on the lousy citizenship that they have from the Palestinian Authority, even for residency in Israel, i.e. not citizens of Israel, but residents of Israel, as the type of the legal status that you have with East Jerusalemites. I mean, that's better for them, or for many of them, and more of them, than the current situation, which is basically, again, the Palestinian Authority is functioning as a municipal authority, and there is no hope or prospects for fulfillment of Palestinian national aspirations. Now, and I probably conclude at this, it's a very gloomy picture, I think, but I think that we have to recognize it and we have to face reality. And even if we succeed, and we should, we have to, we must succeed, and abolish this quest for formal annexation of parts of the West Bank. It will be disastrous. But we also have to face reality that even if we succeed, the creeping annexation and disenfranchisement and dispossession and confiscation of lands in the West Bank will continue, and no one will stop it. And especially no one in the Zionist left, again, very regretfully, will be able to stop it. They're not really, they didn't really try to stop it seriously in the past 10 or 15 years. And no one right now with the black and blue party will even wants to stop it. Sorry, I said black and blue. Yeah, that's a black picture. Yeah, obviously the blue and white. Now, I said that the right wing has won the battle, but I don't think that the left wing has lost the war. And I think the war is to end the occupation. The most pressing need for Palestinians right now, if you ask the Palestinians, don't ask the Israelis, ask the Palestinians. If you ask them, then the most pressing issue is not a Palestinian state. They don't even believe in a Palestinian state. The Palestinian prospects for state or the Palestinian Authority didn't do anything for the ordinary Palestinian in the West Bank and the occupation. So the quest for the peace coalition, two-state coalition, what have you, should be the same quest as human rights organizations in Israel and abroad, which is to end the occupation. So we shouldn't right now think about, I think, my opinion is that we don't need to think about what would be the end game or the political formula, whether it would be a two-state solution or a some sort of a confederation between Palestine and Israel, or one state that again will be only the embodiment of the actual one-state reality that we're living for many years. I don't think we should put any additional thought right now on the end game or the political formula at the end of the road. We should put our 100% of our efforts on ending the occupation. And in this regard, political organizations, human rights organizations, even the Zionist left in Israel is able to do actual additional steps on this issue. It wouldn't be easy. No one here is really wants to hear what we really doing in the West Bank, see what's going on with Breaking the Silence and other human rights organizations. No one in Israel wants to be exposed to this information, but I think this is the real war that we have to fight. And if we fight this war, and if we win this war, then what would be the formula, the formal political formula, I think, is of secondary importance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Assaf. We gave you all quite a tall order, which is in 1 hour to kind of give us an overview of annexation and its potential impact. And we have run 10 minutes over that hour, but the 4 of you did a brilliant job. What it does mean, though, is that we're really, it's now 10 past 10 in Israel. It's getting quite late and we've had lots of questions, but I'm going to do something which I think will be a bit frustrating for the audience. So I apologize in advance, but I'm going to take 3 questions and I'm going to ask them all in one go to our 3 speakers. And then you can answer whichever one of them or however much of them you feel that you can answer. And maybe if we, Shaul apologizes that he's had to go, but he has said for those of you that have asked that he will happily share the slides. So we will send them to you later or tomorrow. But for our 3 speakers that are still here, maybe if we go and kind of back to the order that you've spoken. So Sharon, then Maisam, and then Assaf. And I'll just read you the 3 questions and then answer whichever ones you want. So the first one comes from someone called Joe Cohen, who says, I'm totally against, in capital letters, the proposed annexation. I do not wish to query the use of the term apartheid state. I live in London, but grew up in South Africa. That was an apartheid state at the time. Populations were separated in various ways within the country. The proposed annexation of parts of the West Bank is not the same. If annexation takes place, the annexed areas will be Israel, and the rest of the West Bank will be the Palestinian entity. I think that it does not help to call it an apartheid state. So he's asking if making a statement, but I guess asking for your position on that, whether the comparison is helpful. So the next one is from Yvonne, who says, under the proposed annexation plan, what will be the status of the Palestinian Arabs in annexed areas? And if they're not given full Israeli citizenship, how can Israel continue to claim to be a democratic state? And then the final one is from Susie, who says, do you think that the PA will disband itself in response to annexation? So apartheid, disbanding the PA, and the middle one was whether Israel can remain a democratic state if Palestinians that are annexed don't get the vote. So Sharon, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with the apartheid. I mean, the implications of the suggested plan, that we don't know all the details of the suggested Trump plan, to be honest. It's not into details. Is that there are 2 systems of law. So if people live at the same place, but one is a Palestinian or just nearby the same area, one is an Israeli and the other one is Palestinians, 2 different laws will apply to them. Now imagine in London, if you are a Jew and your neighbor isn't, you have 2 different systems of law. I mean, the rule of law, the idea of rule of law, that it's colorblind, that the law is equal to everybody. And when you start to distinguish between people according to their origin, I don't know how to call it. I mean, I've been to South Africa last year, and when people could travel, and obviously it's devastating. I'm not sure the implication will be exactly the same, but it means different laws to different people by their origin. Okay, this is one thing. The status of Arabs, the answer is, I don't know. What does it mean? I mean, at this stage, as I said, it's not detailed. I don't know. I can't, to be honest, I can't even imagine if Maisam is going to be, for example, going to be displaced and moved to be on the Palestinian side. Is she going to stop being an Israeli citizen? I don't know how to answer it. As about a PA, that's a question in prophecy, not in law. I don't know what is going to happen with the PA and what are the alternatives.
Thank you, Sharon. Maisam, do you want to go next? Oh, you're on mute. Let me just unmute you. Maisam, you're muted.
Now, yes.
Now we can hear
So
you.
when we had this question about apartheid, I said, okay, I want to Google it and I find what is the definition of apartheid. And this is what I found. I found that it is racial segregation, first of all, racial segregation. And we said that when we saw the maps that Shaul showed us, it's a real racial segregation, that what will happen over there. It will be actually like the map in South Africa at the apartheid time. If the one who asked this question lived in South Africa, he can also see the maps in the apartheid period, how they segregated the black people, and this is what will happen also in Palestine. The second one is a policy of political and economical discrimination against non-citizens groups. And when we are talking about annexation, the Palestinian, and Netanyahu said it clearly, the Palestinian who will be in these territories will not have an Israeli citizenship. That means that they are not going to be citizens, and this is apartheid. There will be a second or a third degree citizen. If this is not apartheid, I don't know what apartheid is. And and I think that we didn't talk today about the law, the nation state law that Israel, that the government had approved 2.5 years ago. And it's now by law, I am an Israeli citizen, but by law, I'm inferior than my two Jewish colleagues here, Israeli Jewish colleagues here by law, because I am not a Jew. And this is also, the first step for apartheid for the people who are having citizenship in Israel, not only people who will have residency in Israel. So this is about apartheid. What will happen, if there will be a land swaps, and I call it a transfer of, of the triangle and the area that I'm living in. It's really make me, I'm afraid of what the implication. I don't know what will happen. Netanyahu has said after, after the plan was published, he said, no, we didn't mean it, but I know that they mean it. They gave, the historical also story about the area of the triangle. Yes, that makes me afraid, because I know that, I'm not right now, I'm not having a full citizenship in Israel. My citizenship is not automatically will be helping me, because maybe I will wake up someday and I will find myself losing this citizenship and not having another citizenship. So yes, that makes me afraid for my future and for my children's future.
Thanks, Maisam. And Assaf, do you want to go?
Thanks. Yeah, I'll take both. The questions about apartheid and a democratic state. I'm a political scientist in training, so to an extent, I'm interested in definitions and terminology. I think that when you think about a full-fledged apartheid like you had in South Africa, that obviously is not the case in Israel. But when you think about apartheid as a racial system that differentiates and subjugates different groups of people based on their ethnos to different sets of laws, then it's racial discrimination. You can call it apartheid, you can edit whatever you want, but I think you shouldn't heed the opinions of the empowered people. You should start to listen what the disempowered people think about their situation and ask them if they think it's just or not. So that's about apartheid, and it's connected to the issue of a democratic state. Again, when you think about or talk about a democratic state and you're in Britain, you probably think about liberal democratic state. Israel has never been a liberal democratic state. Israel is at most or at best an ethnocracy or ethnic democracy And again, we should ask ourselves, what's the meaning of being a democratic state, some sort of a democratic state, in a case where you control and rule a population and occupy a population, land and people, for more than 50 years. And you say, yeah, you know, it's a transitory situation or whatever. I don't think that's called democratic in any way. So we should be able to criticize ourselves and look at, again, as I said, and face reality. About disbanding the PA, I think the only people that believe in the PA right now in the Israeli-Palestinian context are the Israeli military security establishment and the Palestinian elite, political elite. That's it. Those are the people who keep the Palestinian Authority alive. No one else believes in the Palestinian Authority. Now, if the Palestinian political elite will be so dismayed that will disband the PA, then Israel will probably either find another subcontractor for maintaining the occupation, or Israel will make the Palestinian residents of the West Bank residents of Israel, like the legal status that they have in East Jerusalem. Again, that might be the best case scenario for them. So that's my take on it.
Thanks, Assaf. I really apologize. I can see all these questions kind of popping in on our Q&A box, but we're going to end it there because it's getting late, particularly in Israel. And I want to thank our speakers, really, Shaul in his absence, and Maisam and Assaf and Sharon for joining us this evening. This is obviously a really live issue, and given the context of COVID and everything else that's going on in the world, particularly in America at the moment, it's kind of difficult to shine a spotlight on it. And what's been really, I think, reassuring for both Yachad and the Israel Fund is that in spite of a lot of other noise and a lot of other issues that are kind of in the spotlight at the moment, there's been real appetite in the Jewish community to engage with annexation. And we've seen that tonight with the numbers of people on this webinar. We've seen that with lots of the other kind of online events we're doing, but particularly, I'm sure a lot of you are kind of watching the debate unfold in the Jewish community here, and we've seen a lot of concerned voices coming out. And Sharon mentioned earlier the letter that came out last week from, I think it was 42 very prominent British Jews, a letter to Ambassador Mark Regev, outlining a lot of the concerns that were discussed here this evening. Concerns that are levelled at the Zionist Federation, the Board of Deputies, about their inability to speak out against annexation. I think I'll just end by saying that it's crucially important that we make sure that there is a vocal British Jewish voice that can speak up in support of democracy, speak up in support of ending the occupation, as Assaf said, and that comes from within the heart of our community and within the heart of a kind of pro-Israel Jewish community in the UK. No doubt we will be in touch with you, Yachad and the Israel Fund, about ways that we can involve you in making sure that that voice is heard. And we really want your engagement and your involvement. So thank you for being on this call tonight, and we will be in touch with you soon.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Right.